Ekam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome friends to this second part of inorganic soil colloid, and the first part we have talked about the basic building blocks of clay mineral structures such as silicon tetrahedra as well as aluminum octahedra, and also we have discussed about the coordination chemistry and how Pauling's rule influence the different coordination structures, and what is the coordination number, and what is the definition of radius ratio, and how they influence the coordination structure. We also have discussed briefly about different primary minerals like feldspar, quartz, and we have started discussing about the secondary soil minerals. In the secondary soil minerals, we have started discussing about the phyllosilicates, and in the phyllosilicate structure, I have shown you that how these individual silica tetrahedra basically link with with adjacent silica tetrahedra to form a sheet-like structure, and they basically do this by sharing their excess negative charge in the basal oxygen atom. And also we have discussed how these octahedral, that is aluminum octahedra, join together to produce this octahedral sheet, aluminum octahedral sheet. So today we are going to discuss in details about some of the important clay minerals, as well as we are going to discuss about some secondary secondary soil minerals also. So let us start. So if we give a quick recap of of the last part of last lecture, so you can see this is a 1:1 type of structure, and in this 1:1 type of layer we see that there is a silica tetrahedral sheet which is also attached to a aluminum octahedral sheet by sharing their apical oxygen. Remember, this apical oxygen is also having an excess of negative charge, and these excess of negative charge are shared between these silica tetrahedra and aluminum octahedral sheet to form this 1:1 structure. So you can see here there is a basal oxygen plane followed by tetrahedral cations, and then hydroxyl and apical oxygen plane, and then octahedral cations are there, and also basal hydroxyl planes from this octahedral sheet. So since there is one tetrahedral sheet and one octahedral sheet, we call it 1:1 type of layer, and this type of clay mineral basically forms due to the stacking of this 1:1 type of layer. So these clay minerals are known as 1:1 type of clay mineral. For example, kaolinite. We are going to discuss the structure of kaolinite in the coming slides, and this is the 2:1 type of layer where one octahedral sheet is sandwiched in between two tetrahedral sheet, so forming a 2:1 type of layer. So again we can see some some planes of atoms, so basal oxygen, then tetrahedral cations, then hydroxyl and apical oxygen we can see, then octahedral cations, then again hydroxyl and apical oxygen, and then we can see tetrahedral cations and obviously basal oxygens. So this is the 2:1 type of structure, and the 2:1 type of clay minerals are also abundant in the nature. For example, montmorillonite, for example illite, vermiculite. So you can see there are majorly two types of soil. One is clay mineral, 1:1 type of clay mineral, another is 2:1 type of clay mineral. There is another type of clay mineral which is called 2:1:1, or sometimes we call it 2:2 type of clay mineral, where we can see some some extra sheets of atom are present in the interlayer space. For example, chloride. We are going to discuss the structure of the chloride in the coming slides. So this slide shows the some important aspects. For example, again this is a 2:1 type of layer, and this is a 2:1 type of layer. So unit cell of 2:1 type of layer is repeating and ultimately forming this 2:1 type of crystal lattice. And remember that here we can see again these oxygen planes, and then silica plane, then oxygen hydroxyl plane, then octahedral cations like aluminum magnesium. So this is aluminum magnesium plane, followed by these oxygen hydroxyl plane, and we can see here we can also see here the tetrahedral sheet, and also so here you can see tetrahedral sheet, octahedral sheet, and tetrahedral sheet. So octahedral sheet is sandwiched between two tetrahedral sheet, so it is making it to a single 2:1 type of layer. And here also we can see another 2:1 type of layer, and in between these 2:1 type of layer, we call it interlayer space. So a crystal of the secondary clay mineral is basically composed of both the layer and also the interlayer space. And in the interlayer we can see there are different adsorbed cations and water present. So depending on clay mineral, the species of cations and the amount of water which is present in the interlayer space varies from one clay mineral to another clay mineral. Another important aspect is d-axis spacing. As you can see, this is a basal oxygen plane, and this is the basal oxygen plane of the next repeating layer of similar atoms. So the linear distance between this basal oxygen plane and this basal oxygen plane is also known as d-axis spacing, and this d spacing is the major criteria for segregating the one clay mineral from another clay mineral. So this basically shows a snapshot of the clay mineral structure model. So you can see here again this is basically showing a 2:1 type of clay mineral, and the crystal of 2:1 type of clay mineral is based on this individual unit cell, which is a 2:1 type of layer, and where the octahedral sheet is sandwiched between two tetrahedral sheet, and there is some planes of atoms you can see. However, the linear distance between two repeating planes of atoms are known as the d-axis spacing. Okay, so also the adsorbed cations and water vary from one mineral to another mineral, and also the interlayer space also can vary from one mineral to another mineral. In case of some mineral, you will see the interlayer space is almost almost absent. However, in case of some mineral, you can see the interlayer space is very high. We'll discuss those things in our coming slides. So one important thing we need to discuss, that is called isomorphous substitution. So I told you that clay develops negative charge because clay is reactive. The reason for its reactive nature is because it develops negative charge. So what is the reason for development of this negative charge? So you can see this is the major reason, that is called isomorphous substitution. So this isomorphous substitution is nothing but substitution of one atom by another atom of similar size in a crystal lattice without disrupting the crystal structure. So it is basically isomorphous, that means similar in morphology. In other words, it is similar in size. So when one atom will replace the similar size of atoms in a crystal lattice without disrupting the crystal lattice structure, then we call it isomorphous substitution. For example, a cation with coordination number 4 can substitute silica in tetrahedra and a cation with coordination number 6 can substitute aluminum in octahedra. Okay, now we have already know that the aluminum can be present in both coordination number 4 and 6. So obviously in the tetrahedral the silica can be replaced by a aluminum atom, because the aluminum atom also has the coordination number 4. Similarly, in the octahedral layer, this aluminum can be replaced by magnesium or iron. So you can see that when this silica, that is 4 positive charge, is getting replaced by a aluminum which is having 3 positive charge, there is an excess production of negative charge. Similarly, when this aluminum with 3 valency will be replaced by magnesium or iron with 2 plus valency, then you can see there is an extra negative charge development, and this charge imbalance is basically created, and this negative charge is basically responsible for the negative charge of this charge imbalance is basically responsible for this negative charge development in the clay surface. So just like I have told you, these aluminum and silica are having the similar size. So therefore, when aluminum replaces silica in a tetrahedral, a charge of -1 is created in a 1:1 type of clay. So let us discuss then these clay mineral structures. So let us start with the 1:1 type of clay, and the group one, these 1:1 clays belong to this group kaolin serpentine group. So as the name suggests, these 1:1 clays consist of a 1 tetrahedra and 1 octahedral sheet held together by apical oxygen atom. Obviously, we have already seen that when apical oxygen atom is shared between the tetrahedral sheet and octahedral sheet, then there is a linkage between these two layers and ultimately forming the 1:1 type of clay. And this 1:1 type of clay can be divided into dioctahedral kaolin and trioctahedral serpentine. I have already discussed what is dioctahedral structure and what is trioctahedral structure. Remember that the dioctahedral structures are those structures in which the 2 out of the 3 octahedral cationic positions are filled. However, when all 3 out of 3 cationic positions in the octahedral sheets are filled, then we call it trioctahedral structure. So you can see the group is kaolin serpentine group, and the subgroup is kaolins and also serpentine, and there are some minerals which are present in kaolins group. Kaolins group minerals are kaolinite, dikite, nakrite, halloysite, whereas the serpentine groups are antigorite and chrysotile. So we are going to discuss the detailed structure of 1 or 2 of them. So let us start with one of the most predominant mineral in the earth crust, that is kaolinite. So kaolinite is the most common 1:1 type of dioctahedral kaolin, and it is synthesized under equal concentration of aluminum and silicon, obviously because it is a 1:1 type of structure. So this synthesized under equal concentration of aluminum and silica. So this is a kaolinite structure. This is a 1:1 type of mineral. So 1:1 type of layer, as you can see here. One important thing is, in this kaolinite structure there is no isomorphous substitution. So it is one of the major feature of kaolinite structure. So there is little or no isomorphous substitution. So when there is no or little isomorphous substitution occurs, obviously the negative charge development is also very little. And also one thing you can see here, that in the interlayer space is almost absent in case of kaolinite, because the interlayer space, these two layers, repeating layers, are basically joined by strong hydrogen bonding. As you can see in this figure, the 1:1 type of layer is joined together by the strong hydrogen bonding, and as a result the interlayer space is almost absent. So due to the strong hydrogen bonding in the interlayer space, there is no shrink swell characteristics in the kaolinite, because the hydrogen bonding is very strong and they will basically collapse the interlayer space. And this is the ideal cell formula, chemical formula of this kaolinite. So let us move to the next slide, that is next important mineral of the kaolinite, that is halloysite. So halloysite is a so let us move to halloysite. So halloysite is a 1:1 type of dioctahedral kaolin. So kaolinite is a trioctahedral kaolinite is basically dioctahedral 1:1 type of kaolin, and also halloysite is also a 1:1 type of dioctahedral kaolin. The only difference in structure is it is having the similar structure as like a kaolinite, but in the interlayer space there is a there are some water molecules. So these 1:1, in between these 1:1 layers, repeating 1:1 layers, we can see some water molecules are present. So it shows some tubular morphology, because when we dry the this halloysite for examining under the scanning electron microscope, due to the evaporation of the water from the interlayer space, the plate-like structure basically rolled, and ultimately it forms the tubular morphology. So drying of this water results in collapse of these clay layers. So only the difference between this kaolinite and halloysite structure is in the interlayer space there are the water molecules, as you can see. Let us move towards the 2:1 type of clays, that is pyrophyllite talc group. So pyrophyllite is a 2:1 type of dioctahedral clay of pyrophyllite talc group, and the chemical formula is this. So in this pyrophyllite mineral there is no isomorphous substitution, so it is basically electrically neutral. So when there will be no isomorphous substitution, then it is called electrical neutral. So obviously these there is a term called permanent charge in the clay minerals, and this permanent charge is basically the negative charge which develops due to isomorphous substitution. Why it is called permanent charge? It is called permanent charge because it is basically the structural property of clay mineral and it doesn't vary. So that is why it is called permanent charge. So in case of pyrophyllite, it is electrically neutral because there is no isomorphous substitution. So layer charge per half cell formula unit is 0 in case of pyrophyllite. There is no interlayer space in pyrophyllite. However, the edges of this pyrophyllite mineral play major role in various physical properties and retention of metals. So this is the structure of the pyrophyllite. As you can see, this is a 2:1 type of mineral, and the 2:1 type of mineral, the interlayer space is almost absent because so there is no isomorphous substitution in either octahedral sheet or tetrahedral sheet. So this is the structure of pyrophyllite. So let us move to the other member of this pyrophyllite talc group, that is talc. So 2:1 type of trioctahedral talc is a 2:1 type of trioctahedral clay of pyrophyllite talc group, and the chemical formula is magnesium, and you can see here the presence of magnesium is essential for this trioctahedral structure. I have discussed it in our first part of this inorganic soil colors, why the presence of divalent magnesium is necessary for producing the trioctahedral structure. And also there is no isomorphous substitution and interlayer space in case of talc also. So layer charge per half cell formula unit is 0. However, the edge sides play major role in various physical properties and retention of metals. So we have discussed about the pyrophyllite and talc group. We have discussed individually pyrophyllite and talc. So let us discuss another important group, that is smectite saponite group. Okay. So this smectite saponite group consists of dioctahedral smectite and trioctahedral saponites. So this group has layer charge of 0.2 to 0.6 per half cell formula unit, and dioctahedral smectite examples are montmorillonite, badellite and nontronite, whereas trioctahedral saponites examples are saponite and hectorite. So let us discuss one of the most important clay mineral, that is montmorillonite. Montmorillonite is a 2:1 type of smectite, and in this montmorillonite the layer charge, it develops negative layer charge, and this layer charge originates from the substitution of magnesium for aluminium in the octahedral sheet. So in the octahedral sheet, when this aluminium, that is 3+, is getting replaced by magnesium, which is a divalent cation, obviously there is a charge imbalance, and this charge imbalance produces the negative charge. So this negative charge is responsible for attracting the positive charge cationic nutrients, and as a result this montmorillonite is nutrient rich, and it is also you can see one thing, that the interlayer space of montmorillonite is highest. It varies from 1 to 2 nanometer or more, and in the interlayer space there are water and exchangeable cations are present. So the interlayer space wise, this montmorillonite is showing the highest d-axis spacing, and this is why due to the monsoon, due to the presence of water, there is swelling of soil, and when this water is getting evaporated during the dry month, they will produce the cracks or shrinking properties. So they will shrink and produce the cracks. So this type of clay mineral is unstable under low pH and high moisture condition. So you can see this is the montmorillonite. This type of soil you can see in western part of India. When you go to Maharashtra and Karnataka, you can see this type of clays are present. These are montmorillonite, and you can see due to the swelling and shrinkage properties, you can see these cracks which are present due to the shrinking of the clay minerals during the summer months. And so when there will be water, when there will be monsoon, when the water will seep in, then these cracks will disappear because of swelling. So these are the montmorillonite and black, this is also known as the black cotton soil. So in badellite and nontronite, isomorphous substitution occurs in tetrahedral sheet. Now you can see in case of montmorillonite, the isomorphous substitution occurs in the octahedral sheet. However, in case of badellite and nontronite, the isomorphous substitution occurs in tetrahedral sheet, whereas the nontronite is iron rich mineral, and saponite, which is which represent the saponite group, is in saponite isomorphous substitution occurs in the tetrahedral sheet. In hectorite, hectorite is basically lithium bearing mineral, and here substitution occurs in the octahedral sheet. Okay, so another 2:1 type of clays are mica, and this mica has layer charge of 1 per half cell formula unit, and dioctahedral micas are muscovite or paragonite, and trioctahedral micas are biotite, phlogoptite and lepidotite. So except paragonite, other micas have potassium in their interlayer space. So this is one of the major source of potassium in the soil. These mica clay micas are the major source of potassium in the soil. So this is basically major potassium bearing mineral in the soil. Weathering basically converts them into partially expandable 2:1 type of clays like illite and vermiculite. So we are going to discuss the structure of illite and vermiculite in our coming slide, but remember that mica is the precursor of both illite and vermiculite, and mica has the potassium in the interlayer space, and due to the presence of potassium in the interlayer space, the interlayer space is very less, because this potassium ion is very small in size, and when they comes in the interlayer space, they basically lock the structure, and as a result the d-axis spacing is also very less. So if we move to the illite, so it is also a 2:1 type of clay. However, this is non-expanding in nature. Remember, it has layer charge of 0.8 per half cell formula unit. So it is intermediate between smectite and mica, and also you can see here in the interlayer space, potassium is the predominant interlayer ion, so it has more silica, magnesium and water, but less tetrahedral aluminum and K plus and water than mica. So when mica undergoes weathering, then you can see the formation of illite. However, the illite, the d-axis spacing is 1 nanometer again, and in the interlayer space of illite you can also see potassium ions are tightly bound, so collapsing the interlayer space. So another important clay mineral is vermiculite. Vermiculite is basically weathered mica products where potassium ions between the molecular sheets are replaced by magnesium ions. I have already told you that in case of mica, the interlayer space is occupied by small potassium ions collapsing the interlayer space. However, when this potassium gets replaced by magnesium ions in the interlayer space due to more weathering, then we can see formation of vermiculite. So vermiculite is very important nutrient rich mineral. It has layer charge of 0.6 to 0.9 per half cell formula unit. There are some dioctahedral vermiculite and trioctahedral vermiculite. In case of dioctahedral vermiculite, substitution in both the tetrahedral and octahedral sheets. However, in case of trioctahedral vermiculite, substitution only in the tetrahedral sheet, and all three of the octahedral cation position are filled with magnesium. So this is the difference between trioctahedral vermiculite and dioctahedral vermiculite. So this is the structure of vermiculite. Remember, there are lots of charge imbalance in both the sheets, and because isomorphous substitution can occur, especially for in case of dioctahedral vermiculite, substitution occurs in both tetrahedral sheet and octahedral sheet, and as a result of that there is huge amount of negative charge, and as a result of that this clay mineral has high nutrient supplying capacity because this can attract huge amount of cationic nutrients. Okay, and in the interlayer space you can see that magnesium and calcium is present along with water molecules. So this is not non-expanding like illite or mica. However, it is somewhat intermediate between illite and montmorillonite. The another important clay mineral which is basically showing 2:1:1 type of structure, or in other words 2:2 type of structure, is chlorite. Now you know that 2:1 clay, chlorite is basically a 2:1 type of clay with continuous hydroxide interlayer. Okay, so in the hydroxide interlayer it is basically composed of either iron or magnesium. So this based on in this 2:1 type of clay, the octahedral sheets are basically occupied by iron and magnesium, and this hydroxy octahedral sheet, which I am going to show you in the next slide, in the interlayer space. So depending on whether there is aluminum present in the hydroxy octahedral sheet or magnesium present in the hydroxy octahedral sheet, we name them differently. For example, in case of ditrioctahedral chloride, the dioctahedral in the 2:1 type of layer and trioctahedral in the interlayer octahedral hydroxide sheet. So the interlayer octahedral hydroxide sheet is basically a brucite layer where the major cation is magnesium. However, the main structure is dioctahedral. So another species is there that is called trioctahedral. That is trioctahedral in octahedral sheet of the 2:1 layer as well as the interlayer octahedral hydroxide sheet. So we can see in these two type of structure. So let us see the structure in details. This is the chloride structure, as you can see here. In the chloride structure, obviously this is a 2:1 type of layer. This is another 2:1 type of layer, and you can see in the in between this 2:1 type of layer there is interlayer hydroxide sheet, and depending on whether magnesium is present, whether aluminum is present, this is either trioctahedral or dioctahedral. So so when the magnesium is present, then obviously it will be trioctahedral structure. When aluminum is present, it will be dioctahedral structure. Now, due to the presence of these interlayer hydroxide sheet, the interlayer space is almost collapsed, as you can see here. So this is also non-expanding in nature, and so this is basically, also we can term it as 2:1 or 2:2 type of clay. Because why it is called 2:2? Because you can see, if you consider this hydroxy interlayer, so basically there will be 2 tetrahedral sheet and 2 octahedral sheets. So that is why it is called 2:1 to 2:2 type of layer or 2:1:1 type of clay. So we have seen that there are certain clay, important clay minerals. We have discussed kaolinite, we have discussed, then we have discussed halloysite, and then we have discussed montmorillonite, we have discussed illite, we have discussed vermiculite, we have discussed chlorite. Now there are some intergrade clay minerals are also there. So these intergrade clay minerals are basically intermediate between vermiculite and smectite. So interlayer space has exchangeable cations and gibbsite-like or brucite-like island, but are not continuous like chloride. So in case of chloride structure, if you go back, you can see this interlayer space is occupied by this interlayer hydroxide sheet, but this interlayer hydroxide sheet is somewhat continuous in nature. However, in these intergrade clay minerals, this interlayer space has exchangeable cations and gibbsite-like or brucite-like island, but they are not continuous like chloride. So accordingly, the interlayer space does not collapse on heating as readily as with smectite and vermiculite, but it does collapse more easily than complete interlayer hydroxide sheets in chloride. So this is the these are some intergrade clay minerals. Now also there are some other clay minerals or secondary minerals called interstratified clay minerals. So interstratified or mixed layer phyllosilicates are structure in which layers of more than one clay mineral stack together within the crystal. So they are usually metastable intermediate products of a sequence of reactions involving member clay minerals. So you can see 2:1 and 1:1 clays have strong intralayer bonding but weak interlayer bonding. So obviously, as a result of that, stacking of layers occurs. So it is kind of interstratified or intermediate. So this interstratified of smectite with chloride is known as korensite, illite with smectite is known as rectorite, and also we can see interstratification of kaolinite with smectite. So so we have now discussed about the crystalline clay minerals. What about the non-crystalline clay minerals? So there are some non-crystalline clay minerals which are basically volcanic origin. So these are clay size, for example allophane and hemogolite. So these are clay size minerals commonly associated with volcanic ash soils where there is sufficient moisture for silica to leach. So they also occur in some non-volcanic regions also. These allophane and imogolite are very important clay minerals from the point of, they are very, in the volcanic region. So the main types of, there are three main types of allophane: aluminium rich soil allophane, then silica rich soil allophane, and stream deposit allophanes. So there are three major types of allophanes, as you can see. So let us discuss about the allophane. So in the allophane, here the silica alumina ratio is 0.84 to 2, and it is basically similar to kaolinite. Aluminium is present in both tetrahedral and octahedral coordination, and it exhibits spherical particles with 30 to 50 nanometer diameter, and soils with allophane have significant organic matter and low bulk density, and allophane can be seen again in the volcanic region. Okay, so this is an allophane clay mineral. The next important clay mineral is imogolite. So here the silica alumina ratio is 1. So aluminium is present only in octahedral coordination, and it exhibits thread-like particles that are parallel tubes of 20 nanometer in diameter. And imogolite has the capacity to absorb monovalent cations like halloysite. Okay, so we have discussed these non-crystalline clay minerals also. So let us discuss some of the fibrous clay minerals. So these fibrous clay minerals has fibrous morphology and is composed of ribbons of 2:1 type of phyllosilicates. So basically they are having the fibrous morphology because of ribbons of 2:1 phyllosilicates. It does not have continuous octahedral sheet, and the ribbons are linked to each other by inversion of silica tetrahedra along a set of SiO-Si bond. So it requires alkaline condition, high silica and magnesium activities for their stability. Example is palygorskite. So if you see the structure, there are the structure of palygorskite. Another mineral is there, sapiolite. So you can see different models are there, like Bradley model and then Guth-Follett model. So you can see how they are formed due to, as we have discussed, the ribbons are linked to each other by inversion of silica tetrahedra along a set of SiO-Si bond. So you can see inversion of silica tetrahedra from this fibrous morphology. Okay. So we have discussed all intermediate. We have discussed crystalline clay minerals. We have discussed non-crystalline clay minerals. We have discussed interstratified minerals. We have discussed fibrous clay minerals also. Now it is time to discuss about some oxide, hydroxide and oxyhydroxides. So oxide refers to metal hydroxides, oxyhydroxides and hydrous oxides. And these hydroxides are metal and oxides have high specific surface area and reactivity. Due to the high specific surface area, they have high reactivity, and they may exist as discrete crystals, as coatings on phyllosilicates and humic substances, and as mixed gels. So this is one example. As you can see, it is this is gibbsite. So this is the gibbsite formula. So it is the most common. Let's go back to gibbsite. So this is the gibbsite formula. It is the most common aluminum hydroxide mineral, and it is found in highly weathered soil like oxysols and altisols, and it has two planes of closely packed or hydroxyl ions with aluminum in between them. In the interior, each aluminum ion shares 6 hydroxyl ions, and on the edge, each aluminum shares only 4 hydroxyl ions. So this is the structure of gibbsite. So let us also discuss about goethite. So this is an iron oxide mineral. It is composed of mainly iron and oxygen, and octahedron is basic structure for all iron oxides, and it can be in either alpha phase, which is hexagonal close packing, and gamma phase, which is cubic close packing. We have you can see the 12-fold coordination which we have discussed in our previous lecture to understand what is hexagonal closed packing and cubic closest packing. So it can be either in hexagonal closest packing or cubic closed packing, and isomorphous substitution sometimes replace iron with aluminium and Mn3 plus or Cr3 plus. So you can see this is the structure. This is a picture of goethite, which is an important iron oxide. And remember that in the soil the red color sometimes occurs due to the presence of these oxides of iron and aluminium. So this gibbsite and goethite are also the reason of development of red color soils. So goethite is most common and thermodynamically stable iron oxide. It found in humid as well as semi-arid region. It has needle-shaped crystals with edges and grooves, and it has double bands of FeOH octahedra sharing edges and corners, and bands bonded partially by hydrogen bonding. So these are some of the important features of goethite. So let us move to the next important iron oxide, that is hematite. So the formula of hematite is Fe2O3, and this is the second most common iron oxide mineral, and it is also responsible for red color of many soil. It is found mainly in highly weathered soil, because this type of mineral basically form when due to the warm and humid climate where chemical weathering is highly pronounced, and it has FeO6 octahedra connected edge by edge. So this is a as you can see here, this is iron oxide, this is hematite mineral. So let us also talk about manganese oxides. So these manganese oxides also occurs as coatings on soil particles, in cracks and veins, and as nodules, and also major source of manganese in soils. They act as oxidant for metals like trivalent arsenic and trivalent chromium. They are mostly amorphous. Some examples are barnesite and pyrolusite. As you can see, I have shared here the picture of pyrolusite. So apart from that, we have some carbonate and sulfate minerals, which also comes under the secondary secondary minerals, soil minerals. So these carbonates and sulfate minerals are most prevalent in arid and semi-arid region where there is high evaporative demand, and as a result of that they are highly soluble compared to the silica materials. There are some unstable carbonate minerals are there like calcite and magnesite. However, there are some stable carbonate minerals are also there like dolomite and siderite. Some sulfate minerals are also there like gypsum, which is basically calcium sulfate dihydrate. So guys, we have discussed the major components of secondary compounds of secondary secondary soil minerals. So we have first discussed the important crystalline clay minerals, then we have discussed the non-crystalline clay minerals, interstratified minerals, intergrade minerals, then fibrous minerals. We have also talked about the iron and aluminium and magnesium oxides and manganese oxides and hydroxides mineral, and also we have talked about carbonates and sulfate minerals. So all these come under the secondary soil mineral group. Okay. So let us talk about the specific surface of the soil mineral. Okay. So if we see the specific surface of the soil mineral, so the specific surface area is a property of solids defined as the total surface area of a material per unit mass, and this is basically represented by square meter of area per kg or square meter per gram of solid. So secondary minerals have high surface area, obviously because of their smaller size, and the total surface area of a secondary mineral is given by this St, which is equal to Ac plus Si, where St denotes the total surface area measured in square meter per gram, and Si basically internal surface area, which is also measured in square meter per gram, and Ac stands for the external surface area. So the summation of external surface area and internal surface area ultimately gives to this total surface area. Okay, so this external surface area, so how we measure this external surface area? So there are some methods. So external surface area is determined by measuring the amount of nitrogen gas absorbed by a surface at temperature near the boiling point of liquid nitrogen. So this external surface area basically determined in the laboratory by measuring the amount of nitrogen gas absorbed by a surface at a temperature near the boiling point of liquid nitrogen. So the surface area analysis is then done by this BET equation, which is the short form of Brunner, Emmett and Taylor theory. So given by these three scientists, Brunner, Emmett and Taylor, this analysis is known as BET. And if the surface area is greater than 10 square meter per gram, generally the adsorbate use is nitrogen. When it is from 0.1 to 10, then the adsorbate use is krypton, and when it is less than 0.1 square meter per gram, the ethylene is used as an adsorbate. Okay, so this is the BET equation. So P by V into P0 minus P equal to 1 by VMC plus C minus 1 by VMC into P by P0, where P is the pressure of a gas at equilibrium with solid, which is Pa, and P0 is the gas pressure required for saturation at the temperature of the experiment, and V is the volume of gas adsorbed at pressure P, and Vm is the volume of gas required for monolayer coverage over the complete adsorbent surface. And the C is basically calculated by using this formula, where E1 is the heat of adsorption of the first layer of adsorbate, and E2 is the heat of liquefaction of the gas, R is the gas constant, and T is the absolute temperature. So this is the BET equation. So one thing is clear in this BET equation, that it is a kind of a formula of a straight line. So this is basically offset, and this is the slope, okay, and this is y and this is x. If we consider this, then things become more clear. So once Vm is determined, so what is Vm? Vm is basically the volume of gas required for monolayer coverage over the complete adsorbent surface. So when we calculate this Vm, then once this Vm is determined by linear plot between P by V into P0 minus P versus P by P0, the specific surface can be calculated according to this formula. Now you see, I told you this is a straight line formula. So if we make a straight line between this y and x, and this is the slope, so we can easily identify this Vm from the offset, and from there we can calculate the Vm. So once Vm is determined, then by linear plot between the specific surface area, so then the specific surface area can be calculated by using this formula, where n is the Na is the basically Avogadro number, sigma is the cross sectional area of an adsorbate in square meter, Vm we have already determined, and V0 is the molar volume. Okay, again Vm is basically we have already calculated, that is volume of gas required for monolayer coverage over the complete adsorbate surface. So using this formula, we can calculate the specific surface of any adsorbent. So if we see if you see the specific surface of different minerals which are present in the soil, then we will see the specific surface of kaolinite and halloysite are minimum, and then as we go to vermiculite, montmorillonite, so these are having high specific surface because of their internal and external surface area. However, in case of kaolinite, there is no internal surface area because the interlayer space is collapsed due to the strong hydrogen bonding. Okay, so this is the variation of specific surface areas of different minerals. So let us discuss what are the two different types of charges occur in the clay mineral. So charge originates in a clay mineral by two ways. One is called permanent or constant charge and variable or pH dependent charge. Now we have already discussed the permanent and constant charge which occurs due to isomorphous substitution. An isomorphous substitution, replacement of one atom by another of similar size. So it is constant because it does not vary with pH. It is a structural property and it develops during the formation of a mineral. So that is why it is called permanent charge or constant charge. Another charge is there that is called pH dependent charge or variable charge. So this charge occurs due to the protonation and deprotonation of functional groups of inorganic soil minerals, and it changes with pH, so that is why it is called variable charge. So if you see this is a clay mineral and the edges, these hydroxyl groups are there. So these are basically terminal bonds, and also they are basically ionizable functional groups. So depending on the pH, so when there is a low pH, obviously there will be H plus ion concentration, high H plus ion concentration. So extra proton will attach to these exposed sides or broken edges to form these positive charge end, and vice versa. In case of alkaline condition, these H plus will be dissociate to form a water molecule by mixing with the hydroxyl which is present in the alkaline condition, forming this negative end. So you can see depending on the pH variation, we can see either positive charge or negative charge development. And this pH dependent charge we can see mainly in kaolinite and iron and aluminum oxides. However, as we go towards the 2:1 type of mineral like montmorillonite, vermiculite, this pH dependent charge, magnitude of pH dependent charge is very less. In case of this mectite and in case of montmorillonite and vermiculite, the magnitude of constant charge is always higher than that of magnitude of this pH dependent charge, and this is totally opposite in case of kaolinite as well as in case of iron and aluminum oxides. Okay, so this is how the charge develops in the soil. This positive charge is basically responsible for attracting the negative charge anions like nitrate, sulfate, which are very and also orthophosphate, which are very important. Which are very important mineral which are very important element for plant growth. So this pH dependent charge is also very important for retaining these anionic nutrient in the soil. Now let us go to our next slide, that is X-ray diffraction analysis. This is very important. Now how we can differentiate the clay mineral? This is because of this X-ray diffraction analysis. So X-ray diffraction analysis can differentiate the d-axis spacing of one mineral to another mineral. So you can see these are some parallel atomic planes, and the distance between these parallel atomic planes is known as the d-axis spacing, as you can see here. So how we can calculate the d-axis spacing? So you can see here there are some parallel incident. Let me just let me so you can see here there are some parallel incident X-rays. So when this incident X-rays will basically when they will be reaching these atomic planes, they will be diffracting by these atomic planes. Okay, so you see there is the distance of atomic planes d can be determined based on this equation called Bragg's equation. Okay, and in this Bragg's equation it says that the two incident X-rays will constructively interfere if the extra distance that ray 1 travels is a whole number of wavelength farther than what ray 2 travels. Okay, so you can see there are two parallel beams of X-rays. So this is beam 1, ray 1, and let us consider this is ray 2. Okay, so as you can see this ray 2 is is traveling some extra distance than ray 1, that is BC plus CD, and this BC plus CD is basically n lambda. So BC plus CD is basically 2d sin theta. So n lambda equal to 2d sin theta. This is the Bragg's equation. Okay, so different clay minerals have various basal spacing or atomic planes. So for example, this basal spacing of kaolinite is 7.2 angstrom. So basically using these n lambda equal to 2d sin theta, by using this formula we can calculate the d-axis spacing of different clay minerals, and from this d-axis spacing we can calculate we can basically identify the clay mineral. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see that there are different types of treatments which are necessary for determining the clay mineral by using the X-ray diffraction. So we can see there are different types of treatment like potassium saturation, magnesium saturation, and these kaolinite, montmorillonite, vermiculite, mica, chlorite, they will produce these X-ray diffraction peaks at different positions due to their variation in the d-axis spacing. So guys, we have completed our discussion on the inorganic soil colloids. I hope that you have learned something. So please follow this book for more details. Environmental Soil Chemistry by D.L. Sparks, second edition, and you'll be more enriched to different aspects of soil chemistry and also the structure of different clay minerals. So thank you very much, and let us meet in our next lecture, where we are going to discuss about the organic colloid, organic clay. So thank you.